Thank you very much for joining us today. I see that the Premier and the Cabinet are just preparing to come out. First, I'd like to just thank everyone for joining us today. I will open by saying that we're here because we're all concerned. There have been a number of concerns brewing over the weeks and months, a number of conversations that have been happening in chat groups, in private conversations, and on social media. And over the past month, those conversations, those concerns have started to rise to the surface. And as a result, here we are today. First, I would like to not only thank all of you who have shown up today, but also thank everyone who is supporting this, who is not here. Because they're concerned potentially about repercussions. They haven't built up the courage to stand in the way that you have stood, but still, we are concerned about them. I'll say that there are a number of concerns. I see a number of signs out in the crowd. Everyone may not agree with everything that everyone's concerned about, but what unites us is that we all have concerns. We need to focus on the things that bring us together rather than the things that keep us apart. Our interest is what's in the best of all of our people. No one should be left alone. And we should all feel represented in everything that happens for us in our country. So I would like to thank the Premier and all the Cabinet members for showing up today. It's very important that you have shown us the respect to bring your presence along here with us. Right now, I'm going to have Antonio Belvedere just give recommendations that have come from the group to the Premier. Mr. Belvedere. Thank you. Okay, what's that? You're going to read it out now, or is you going to let him say it? You're going to read it out now? Yeah. So now I'll just let the Premier give a few comments to the audience.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. The one thing that is great about a country which we live in, such as Bermuda, is the fact that we have a strong and vibrant democracy. And the most important thing in a strong and vibrant democracy is for all persons to be respected. The Cabinet is out here today, and we're going back inside to certainly continue our work. One of the main things which we're discussing today, as it was said by Mr. Dean about the things that unite us, we are going back inside to work on something that is critical, which is affordable access to health care for every single person in this country. The work of which we're doing will continue. As I said, I welcome the suggestions and recommendations which will come. As I had said, we will give them due consideration, and I am grateful that we live in a democracy where everyone is free to express their opinion. Thank you very much and have a great day.
All right, thank you very much, Premier Brett. Thank you again to the Cabinet Minister. I would just
Just make sure that everybody knows that they're going to hear us. They're going to hear us.
So we'll just make sure that we keep our voices up so they continue to hear us inside. So between Antonio and I, we're going to let you know what was just submitted. Attention, Premier David Burke. As concerned citizens, we are writing to inform you that we have lost confidence in the ability of your government to honor, respect, and adequately represent the interests of Bermuda, its residents, and its people in your management of the pandemic. Despite the fact that you have been granted emergency powers, we struggle to understand the legality of several of your mandates. We reject all discriminatory mandates and the divisiveness that has proliferated throughout this community as a result of their implementation. We find ourselves appalled at the outright coercive tactics used to further what appears to be elusive agendas that remain unclear to all of us outside of your immediate circles. Your inability to manage the unintended consequences associated with the rollout of half-baked mandates have resulted in delays, gross inefficiencies, unnecessary costs, stress, frustrations, and the aforementioned mandates being taken offline or reversed. These mandates have clearly been enacted prior to being adequately prepared. There has been a lack of transparency and objectivity, an unwillingness to communicate, and an outright disregard for input from the broader community, regardless of its nature, relevance, or potential to help our country move forward. You and your colleagues were elected to represent the interests of our people. Yet large segments of the community feel alienated, disrespected, and misunderstood. Rather than feeling encouraged, inspired, and protected by the efforts of your government, what we have seen repeatedly throughout the course of the pandemic suggests that our concerns are relatively insignificant and your primary interests lie elsewhere. While many of us were appreciative of your efforts initially, the general sense within the community is that you have now gone way too far. In closing, should you and your government be interested in regaining the trust of your citizens and understanding our concerns, the following items have been prepared for your consideration. What your government decides to do with this information is totally up to you. Likewise, we the people recognize that as long as we are left to suffer the absence of reasonable representation, it is within our rights to continue taking the necessary steps to voice our concerns and engage in suitable measures to represent ourselves. This is up to us, everyone. We're not asking for anything. We're not even demanding anything. It's up to you to listen. Either you respect us or you don't. Either you care about us or you don't. Either you love us or you don't. The choice is yours. And the choice is ours to use whatever means we have to voice our concerns and to represent ourselves. We are responsible for ourselves, each of us. We elect people to represent us. If we are not represented, what do? We take matters into our own hands. This is just the beginning. We are only starting. We will continue to move forward. We will continue to band together. We will unite as a people and do what's necessary to do the best for our country and each other. Give thanks, everyone, for coming out. Antonio is going to now lead the list of recommendations that we gave to the government.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to read off the list of demands that we just gave to the government, and then from there, I'm going to kick into my spiel. And I'm sure you all, well, I'm hoping you all, aren't tired of hearing my voice. And the public health emergency order. 1, suspend all new travel entry regulations. Remove mandatory quarantine in a government-approved hotel facility for unvaccinated persons. That's number 1. Number 2, end discriminatory practices within the community, i.e. policies that ask vaccination statuses. And and the testing of only unvaccinated employees occurring in hotels and at the hospital, and promotions and gifts for vaccinated people only. Revise travel authorizations to revert to the format used pre-May 2nd, 2021. Number 3, cease and desist with the vaccination program for all children under the age of 18 and young adults. Begin the process of ending the PCR testing. Reduce number of times to test after travel. Use suitable saliva, non-invasive tests that individuals can purchase on their own. And government-imposed interceptions through customs of persons who order at-home tests. Number 5, eliminate the Safe Keep program, as it is an invasion of privacy, exposing people's personal and medical information unlawfully, and it steps towards the COVID passport that we do not want. Number 6, focus on the management and treatment of the virus. Prioritize transparent reporting of adverse effects in the same manner the vaccination program has been promoted. Acknowledge the presence of natural immunity. Open the conversation about effective treatments for COVID. And number 7, convene a diverse panel of key stakeholders from the community to assist with policy making. So that's what we just gave to Mr. Burt. And I said in our meeting last night that I wasn't going to write up anything because I usually speak from the energy, and I want to say that the energy here is amazing today. I want to say that it is diverse, it is equal, and that's what we want. I know that in this crowd there are vaccinated and unvaccinated people, and guess what? We don't care. Period. So I wrote something so I can have a guide and I don't go off track or forget. Because that will happen, and you see in my ranch, I have my voice. We are here today to demand change. We are not here to ask for anything. We are here to demand. This government has put this country in a worse state of mental health than we were already in. Their inconsistent regulations with the division of the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And now, the mandatory quarantine and the fact that people have to pay to enter this country, $75 for a TA, $300 for an exemption. I will not pay to enter my country. The only time I will pay to enter my country is when I pay for my ticket, and that's it. All we should need is a negative test on our passport at the airport. My medical information is just that. It's mine. Kim Wilson has stated plenty of times on the press conferences, and if you don't remember, ask me because I've screen recorded all of them, where she says that your medical information is your medical information. So when a TA comes up online and the window comes down, if you guys are all seeing it, we've done all the research, it asks if you're vaccinated or not vaccinated. It doesn't matter. When you come into Bermuda's airport, you should not be in a separate line. You should not have a different color paper. This same government is a government who fought for equal rights back in the day. This is equal rights right now. We don't go around asking everybody's STD statuses or anything like that. And I have to keep it 100 because we don't do that. So I'm not going to ask you if you're vaccinated or not. And I don't wish for anybody to ask me. Everybody already knows I'm not vaccinated. Everybody already knows that. Period. See, I got off track. Okay, here we go. I'm not a prisoner. I'm a hard-working Bermudian who does not need to be treated differently because you don't like the choice I made. What this government is doing is inhumane and illegal. I'm asking the people of this country today to stop being so passive and do your research, find out your rights, because a government tells you one thing doesn't mean that it's legal. Because having Bermudians stranded and not being allowed in this country is illegal. Seniors who are away from medical were being stuck in airports. I know of a 91-year-old man, the first day that this started, he was stuck in Boston's airport because of his TA. We all know how medical works. The insurance company stops paying. They tell you when you're leaving. You don't tell them when you're leaving the States. So I just want to close and say, I want to thank everybody for coming out. We today are not here to speak to them. We gave them what we need to give them. We are here to speak to you. We are here to let you know that if you are afraid, we're not. I'm already blacklisted. I don't care. I'm here to stand up for the people of this country, for my kids, for my rights, for my freedoms. I go away next week, and when I come back, you will hear if there's any drama. Have a good day.
Yes, give thanks to yeah, he never fails on the delivery, you know. So I was gonna let Patty Gill come up first, yeah. So today we have a number of people coming forward. I'm very appreciative for the voices who have had the courage to come out in the community and in the media and speak. And right now, I'm gonna ask someone who you're all familiar with, has been working very diligently on a court case around this matter. So I'm gonna have Mark Pettingill come to the mic and say a few words now. Give thanks, let's give him a round of applause.
Afternoon. I took my shoes off so I can feel the grass, because I won't be able to do that if I'm locked up in a hotel room for 2 weeks. And I'd encourage everybody to do that type of thing on a daily basis, because the best medicine is right out here. It can go. The best medicine is right out here in the sunshine and the vitamin D and all of the things that you're not going to be able to get if you have to be forced to quarantine. You know, but I must say this. I do want to speak briefly just to the government and what they have done, because I learned a long time ago in politics, which thankfully I have nothing to do with anymore, but you know, if you say the right thing, people will criticize you. And if you say too much of it, they will criticize you. And if you say too little, they will criticize you. But if you say and do exactly the right thing, they will still criticize you. So there is no win for everybody, whether there was, but there isn't. And then what we have to do is find and draw the lines in the sand where we can say, thus far and no further. So I commend the government for the positives, and let's be honest, there have been positives about how this pandemic has been dealt with. And we all got on side. People wore their masks, people socially distanced, people paid attention for the large part. But history is made by people saying, okay, well, hold on a second, where are my rights, and where does the divide come where I have to say, you've gone too far? Now, just briefly, and not to bore you all, but it's important, when you talk about your rights, you're talking about your constitutional rights and your human rights. And those constitutional rights are contained in the Constitution of Bermuda, which we have a fantastic written constitution, and it gives you your freedom of movement and your freedom of conscience. And that really is what we're here about today. That's what everybody is talking about, are those freedoms. Now be clear, ladies and gentlemen, it does give the government the right to say that in a crisis, a health crisis, that they can take action that is obviating of those rights. On this basis, these two key words, that they are reasonably required in the interest of public health. So the question that we must ask is the actions that are taking place reasonably required in the interest of public health? So, I'm a guy of evidence and facts, and we all should be. Let's ask ourselves this. This is the example as it stands in law in our country. One family arrives at the airport with their children. The mother of that family and her 2 kids is vaccinated. She takes a COVID test, and she's positive. You all know that happens to vaccinated people, right? You all know that happens to vaccinated people. They test positive for COVID. Just positive. No slight up and down or whatever. You're positive. You can spread it, right? So she tests positive. Listen to the logic, as the law is. She tests positive. Her and her kids go home to their house. The lady behind her is not vaccinated, and she's with her 2 kids, and she tests negative. Where does she go? She goes into forced quarantine with her 2 children. She goes into a mandatory lockdown. Now, let's just think about that logically. How logically does that fly? It doesn't fly. And one then has to ask the question, is that reasonably required that the government enforces that? Is that reasonably required that the mother who is unvaccinated and tests negative has to go in to a mandatory quarantine? That to me is the whole simplistic matter of what is wrong with this issue. That's it right there. And if you cannot, and I believe that you cannot by science justify where that is necessary, then you have to adjust your position. You have to adjust your position. Because no one can explain to me and say, that's okay, it makes sense, and it's reasonably required, and it's supported by scientific evidence that that unvaccinated mother with her children should have to go into a 12 by 12 room without the sheets being changed, eating what they tell you to eat, and locked down for 2 weeks. Where are we living? Where are we living? What's the problem with quarantining at home? Do you know how many prosecutions we've had quarantine for a while? People have had to quarantine. How many, if the government is so concerned, they're so concerned about people won't abide by the quarantine position at home, how many cases of prosecutions have there been for breach of quarantine? None. There have been 0. So if you're going to do something, you have to base it on facts. If you had 50% of the people going home that were quarantined, that were running around and coughing on everybody and had COVID, you'd get it. But that is not the evidence, and that is not the scientific facts. It just simply is not. So I beg of this government, before we have to go down the road of expensive court cases and all the rest of it, which governments win cases like that, be warned, folks. I'm not sitting here saying you're a slam dunk on a court case, because you're not, right? They can get in and argue, and the matter for the court, and you've seen how that goes. You're down the road to appeals, and somebody appeals. I'm asking them, before we get there, to reasonably consider the point that I have just made. And let's be honest, your whole cabinet does not support the position that you're taking. Let's be really honest. They do not. They have to come out here with their shoes on and stand around and say, yes, of course we do. That's called collective responsibility. But the fact of the matter is, they do not all support the stance you're taking. We already know the position of the backbench of the government. They do not support it. I would say take it to a vote in that House, because you didn't last week. Take it to a vote, and let's hear you speak to your MPs as constituents and say what you want about what is reasonable, and take it to that vote. That hasn't happened. So before we get into messy court cases, just please, please revisit that point on how you justify the sensibility of the example that I've given, because I do not believe that you can, right? Plato said, the essence of wisdom is to recognize your own ignorance. And all I'm calling on the Premier to do, with all respect, and the Cabinet, is to just recognize that on this one, you don't have it right. Listen to the people, and let's get it right. Thank you so much.
Give thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. Yeah, I remember one time saying to a politician that you don't always have to be right, you know. It's actually okay to apologize. But for some reason, politicians feel like they have to dig in and just defend their own ignorance. Very interesting phenomenon. So, some months ago, I had questions, you know, and I'm sure a lot of you had questions. But I just started calling people. So I started calling around because I said, I can't be the only one feeling like this. I got concerned when, in the midst of a pandemic, which is dealing with health, I kept hearing from politicians. I said, why are politicians always on TV? Where are the doctors? So I started calling doctors. So what's going on? Are you guys being invited to come in to participate? Is there like a task group being formed? Are we doing research? What's going on? What are the treatment options? Nothing happening. So next thing we found ourselves in this circle of health professionals, you know. They started telling me about patients first, and it's interesting that the Premier brought it up, talking about the healthcare policy that the doctors already pushed back on. And apparently because of that pushback, the relationship between private doctors, you know, and the government was frayed. And so there was no outreach. So anyway, we kept talking, and eventually we decided that we needed to get their voices into the public domain. The media wasn't covering them. It was this narrow view just being pushed and pushed and pushed. Anybody outside of that was being censored or dismissed. So out of that group emerged some very brave souls, some doctors who are willing to come out of their private practice and stand forward and speak truth to the situation that we face here today. One of those brave souls is about to come and speak to you now. Dr. Amani Flood, referred to by the media as non-medical Dr. Amani Flood, very disrespectful. Naturopathic doctor, very insightful, a good friend of mine, and someone who stood tall in the midst of a lot of pushback from the status quo. So without further ado, Dr. Amani Flood.
You want to take the mic in your hand? Or you want to just, yeah, that's fine.
Good morning. The energy out here is palpable, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. It is what democracy is. It's the voice of the people and your concerns. So I'm here today in the spirit of Mary Prince, who was recently celebrated as a national hero for her courage and independent thought. And we want to see more of that. And that is why we are all here today. I want to thank Eugene. He has done a wonderful job, the whole team of people who are with Concerned Citizens. All of us have decided to step up because we really don't have a choice. We don't see it as a choice. We see it as an obligation. So I'm Dr. Amani Flood. I'm a doctor of naturopathic medicine. I have a 4-year postgraduate degree in health and medicine. My area of specialty is health prevention and gentle medicine. And as such, I am a staunch believer in health choice. Now, choice can only exist truly where there's the absence of punishment for your health choice. Otherwise, it's not a choice. I don't wear your labels. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not opposed to COVID regulations. I'm not even against quarantines when they are fairly and equally used. As Mr. Pettengill explained, there's no excuse for saying that you're concerned about a pandemic, a disease, and you allow a carrier of the disease to go into the community or go home, and someone who is not carrying the disease or shown to be carrying the disease to go into forced quarantine or forced incarceration. It makes no sense, scientifically or logistically. What I am is a concerned medical professional who has seen some very, very suspect behaviors undertaken by the scientific community. These behaviors are disturbing at best and frightening at worst. Never have I seen so much silencing of voices of those who just want to participate in the proper management of this dangerous disease. Never have I seen such censorship, falsehood disguised as science. It's time to make some changes in the management of COVID-19 in Bermuda. It's time to open the floor to broader discussions, more input from across the spectrum of interested persons, more inclusion of other voices, rather than the echo chamber of similar views that is prevailing right now, where the one idea just bounces off the wall until it hits us all in the head. Health and medicine are a moving target. Yesterday is different from today, and today is different from tomorrow. The interests of one group is different from the interests of another group. Who is looking out for the interests of non-vaccinated people in Bermuda? It appears that no one stands for those holding the view that they are not ready or simply unwilling to participate in this vaccine experimental trial. However, we are ready and willing to take other measures and cautions that we do not feel we need to explain ourselves any further than that. We hold alternative views, and as such, we deserve to be heard and considered. The mandatory quarantine is hurting segments of this community in ways that are both known and unknown. What about the guest workers in this community who have business and personal matters outside of these borders? If they cannot afford lengthy time away from their jobs, and if they do not have unlimited financial resources, the mandatory quarantine is nothing more than an undue burden that cannot be met by the average person. Therefore, it removes one's right to medical choice because it is an insurmountable obstacle to our freedom of movement and freedom of participation in the activities of a normal society. It's coercion, and it is wrong, and it must be dismantled now. The earlier quarantine measures in place have been good enough to keep Bermuda as safe as it is today. With the ravages of COVID disease going further and further away from this community, it's working and it should be continued. But the mandatory imprisonment is unnecessary, unconstitutional, and it must be removed immediately if Bermuda is to be seen to be equally concerned about all of its citizens and lawful residents, vaccinated or non-vaccinated. This division will continue to tear this community asunder if it is allowed to stand. What do we want? Health choice. When do we want it? Now! Thank you. you very much.
Give thanks, Amani. What a soldier, you know? Yeah, appreciate of that. So Antonio came up here, he said he prepared notes on his phone so he wouldn't forget anything, and guess what? He still forgot something. But we love him anyway, so come forward, Antonio. This is pretty important what he has to share.
Yeah, sorry guys. It's actually very important, the thing that I forgot, so I do apologize. The Premier came out yesterday and stated that we should be marching or protesting for other things besides this. One being violence, and one being the road fatalities. So I said that when I do my speech as a chef, I can multitask. So we can march here today and remember those lives that were lost over the weekend. So the one thing that I did forget to do was a moment of silence. So I'm just asking if we can have a moment of silence for those two young men who lost their lives, for their families. Because I don't know if you guys know, but I'm not just a political activist. This is new to me. I am a community activist that has been fighting against gang violence, and I've also lost countless of friends to the roads as well. I've been in these streets since 2009, been in these trenches fighting these fights. So for the Premier to say that, I'm done peace marches where they weren't condoned, where I had to fight for a permit to have a peace march. So today, we are going to have a moment of silence for those who's lost their lives over the weekend. So I'm just going to time it. It's going to be 1 minute exactly, okay? Starting now. Thank you very much. So let's continue to keep those families, the friends, in your prayers, in your thoughts. Anything we can do to support and uplift them in these times, but we can also fight. Thank you.
Yeah, give thanks, Antonio.